Hello, and welcome again to today's continuation of yesterday's conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about marketing local grains with Rachel Graper and Calla Norman again from yesterday. My name is Cassandra Malice, and I am a program manager. Hi, Rachel.
Hello.
Hi, Calla. I'm a program manager at Craft, and I just wanted to give a little bit more information about what we are doing with this webinar series that we're so excited about. We have a series of grains related industry specific webinars coming up that if you haven't signed up for, do so if you're interested. So on the 19th, July 19th at 12 p.m., we have Brewing Local with John Trogner from Trogs Independent Brewing. On July 26th, we have Know Your Malt with CNC Malt. And on August 2nd, we have Recipe Development with Local Grains with Erica Bruce of Le Bogoto. So you can sign up for all of that. I will drop a link in the chat. Also, we are recording today's webinar, and we recorded yesterday's webinar as well. So if you couldn't make it or you want to go back and reference either of these, we will email them out to everyone who registered for this class, and they'll also be on Craft's public YouTube page. So you can check it out there at your leisure as well. Please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat function to throw questions in throughout today's conversation. Today is going to be much more conversational than yesterday. So the point is to really, ask your specific questions as well. And our experts can field them for you. And then also, I just wanted to mention that we at Craft have just launched the Commonwealth Grains Community, which is a way for grains industry professionals to connect, network, learn from each other, and share resources. So if you're interested in that as well, I will drop a link to join that in the chat as well. And I think that's it for me. I think we can jump right in. I will let Rachel and Calla reintroduce themselves today, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you all for joining.
Great. Thanks, Cassandra. So I'll go first. My name is Rachel Graper, here today to talk about marketing local grains. So as Cassandra said, yesterday we talked a lot about branding local grains, how you set up your narrative. Today will be a little more conversational. So I know Calla has prepared some questions. You're also all welcome to send them in the chat. And yeah, happy to have a great conversation about insights from yesterday or just new questions that come about today.
All right, and hi everyone, my name is Calla Norman. I'm a current graduate student in the Chatham Masters of Food Studies program and the MBA program. And I also work in marketing at Honeycomb Credit and with Craft. So I'm super excited to have this conversation today. And as you know, we've said before, please feel free, those of you in the audience, to put in your questions. But in the meantime, let's just get into it, Rachel.
Great.
So the first question that I've got for you is, how do you create or communicate value to consumers?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. And what we're always trying to do as entrepreneurs, like how do we take the awesome stuff that we are creating and really communicate it the most effectively so that people buy, so our business grows, so we can keep doing more of what we want. I think a lot about this one specific quote. So back when I was studying, I had a marketing professor named John Mather, and he would always say, you know, he was like a very insightful guy, but like had a funny little gruff delivery, and would say, people don't buy goods and services. And he'd like wait for us all to react, right, in class. People don't buy goods and services. They rent solutions to their problems. And I think that particular quote is incredibly insightful. I have been known to write it on a Post-it or type it up on a piece of paper and put it behind my desk. Because it really is one of these shortcuts that can make you go back and think like, am I actually solving a problem for the customer? Or is this just, a line extension? So we had a chocolate ice cream and now we have a double chocolate ice cream, right? Not to say that it's not good and it's not going to sell incrementally more, but it might also eat into your chocolate sales. So like, have you really solved a new problem that exists out there? Have you really innovated? And the one example I think about a lot that I think really fits this particular quote is, for many, many years, maybe for 100 or 200 years, if you had a picture frame that you wanted to hang on your wall, a nail was the best, most efficient solution to hang that picture frame up, right? And maybe it hurt the plaster a little bit, but this was the only option. Like, You want a picture on the wall, you use a nail. And those nails are 10 or 15 cents. So then 3M came along with all their adhesive technology and created the tape strip, right? Now you have a way that you have a little hook that hangs on your wall, doesn't hurt the plaster or hurt the drywall or the wood or whatever you might have. You put it up. Oh, I positioned it too far to the left. I'm going to move it 3 inches. You just release that and you move it, right? So really at the end of the day, no one was buying nails. They were renting solutions. And the solution was to hang a picture on the wall. And 3M somehow got that, I mean, I can't even imagine what that, innovation meeting was like. Like, what do we do? What as though there were like a great problem out there with people thinking they even had, an issue hanging pictures on the wall, right? But somehow they found this insight and people were willing to pay 20 times more to solve this very common problem. In this case, it was taking it from like a 15-cent solution to a $5 solution or whatever the dynamic might be. But that, I think, is the question we always have to ask ourselves. What problem are we helping to solve? Because inevitably, you're just renting a solution, right? You're hungry right now. You need to prepare a meal for your family or for this banquet or whatever. You're renting a solution to a problem that's going to reappear. So that is the number one thing I'd go back to.
All right. So to that end, when you actually are getting into the process of starting to market your product, what best practices would you suggest for marketing local grains or for products that might contain local grains? What kinds of messages do you think are the most impactful for consumers?
Yeah, good question. Sorry, I'm just taking a couple of quick notes so I make sure I write this down. I answer completely. Well, one of the things we talked about yesterday was stickers. And I really think that you want to tell that narrative. You want to build the kind of brand story in the way that we talked about yesterday and have this construction that supports a clear story. But the reality is like, going back to the example of the granola. So I made, for those of you that weren't on yesterday's call, I had a local granola company produced in Pittsburgh, sold through markets throughout Pittsburgh and the East Coast. And so one of the very simple things I did was to create Avery labels that said local Pittsburgh, PA, right? So whenever we were there on production day, we did hundreds or thousands of bags and then sort of sequestered. Half of them got local stickers, half of them went off to non-local sources. And this was a way to just get that message across. This is like a very simple, low cost thing to do. But the reality is like, you're not going to be there for every sampling event. You're not going to be out there all the time to be able to tell that message. So it can help both with someone just have stopping power to see your product retailed somewhere that you may not be with it. And also can just be a reinforcement when someone sees it in their own pantry that this kind of feels good, that they want to support local people. I think another big tactic though, is just trying to get your face, your brand name, whatever out there in the community. So in particular, sampling events I found to be incredibly helpful. This is of course going to be more toward your retail products or your beer companies and so forth that are selling grains in those ways. So ways that you can have that exposure more in the business to consumer side, just being out there and having someone interact with you once. And certain retail locations will lend to this more than others. I found I had my products in the East End Food Co-op, and I found that to be incredibly helpful because that was sort of a hub where many people came from the region that were really involved with food, that were really knowledgeable, or perhaps hadn't been food knowledgeable, but happened to have an allergy and had deep research or knowledge in one particular area. They would go tell their friends about it. They would also say, I actually only come down here once a month to stock up, but I live in the South Hills. And there's a place where I think it'd be really good. I'm going to go tell the grocery manager about, do you have a card? Do you have a card that I can give them? So things like that, I always found it to be like a little tempting to try to get someone else to do those sampling events when I could. And I took advantage of that as well. But being able to be face-to-face for these meaningful interactions was something that was really helpful. I'd also add like more for the B2B. So we talked about, again, if you have a beer or you have something that's being sold primarily to restaurants, similarly going out and making sure that you're just checking in every now and then on the phone, but also participating in events, doing as much cross promotion as you can to say, you know, we are happy to be with this establishment. Maybe it's a social media message, or just asking them to put your company name within the menu, or having some sort of opportunity. It might even be something like, hey, we have, you know, this beer we're producing with these local, you know, grains and hops and things of that nature. Can we come out and do just a pre-service event for your restaurant, just as an appreciation for your employees? And maybe you go for 1 hour and do a short tasting. Something like that can create so much goodwill with people that are in a position to then recommend your product, right? So I find those sorts of events to be sort of a behind the scenes marketing that really pays dividends. And then you really have the opportunity to say in your own words the message you want them to be repeating to your potential customers.
Right. Yeah. Here's to having more of those in person, face to face.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
that's a really great point, Calla. I just, I totally blanked and I went back to a different world 18 months ago. But yes.
About a year and a half to happen, you know, we'll just pretend.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is so important, you know, by having that relationship, by like creating that value and having that, you know, that personal connection with people, they not only become your customers, but they become advocates for you. And so like your customers in turn become a marketing tool.
Yes.
So it makes it super important.
That's absolutely right.
So Dan Gilder has a question.
Great.
He wants to know, does local really resonate? He says that he hasn't yet found that many customers for bread care about
bread.
Like, what's the best way to educate customers about the benefits of local in the maybe 2 seconds that you might have as they walk by your booth at the farmer's market?
Yeah, fair enough. And Dan, I wonder if it's possible through chat, can you give us a little more information? Like, I'm curious, is the farmer's market your primary sales channel? And like, are you selling 20 different breads, or do you have 2? Like, give me the Cliff's Notes on what you do so I can give a more specific answer, if you don't mind.
He says yes, that the farmer's market is the primary sales channel, and he sells about 6 to 7 different varieties of bread.
Great. Yeah, this goes back to, and Dan, I'm not sure if you were in yesterday's session, so I'll repeat just the brief summary on brand positioning again. This goes back to why it's so important to really know the 10-second version of what your brand is. And I'm going to make one up for you, not knowing your brand exactly, but you know, we are the local company that makes, you know, has whatever the tremendous rye breads, right? Because we get them from this local farm that we either harvest ourselves or we partner with this farm. It's because we employ, I don't know, recently incarcerated people, or, you know, Italian people of Italian descent that their families been making bread for 70 years or whatever. Like, you find what those narrative stories are, and you kind of put that together, because then you can make choices that even in the styling of the little signs that you have on your farmer's market booth, or the color of the, you know, 10 by 10 tent that you use or whatever, all these like very small choices sort of support that main message. Then you don't have to rely so heavily on, you know, just like text as an example, right? Which text is going to take you time. You might need to stop and like take it in a little more. Certainly the choices I made for my granola company weren't all perfect, right? But to give an example, what I did at that point in time was I didn't have a branded 10 by 10 tent. Like, I couldn't afford that at the time I was starting, but I got one that was like a natural brown color that was very similar to the colors that was in my product. So I had used, you know, like a craft paper. That was the color of the booth overall. I had, of course, I had the logo kind of tied onto the front of the table itself. I also used wooden crates, and I had them sort of sideways. They were facing out, and they had the granola bags in there. The idea was, even if you didn't look over to see what my company was doing yet, and you saw it out of the corner of your eye, you sort of already had this feeling that it was a natural product, right? Because you saw the brown, you saw, like, it was unlikely you were going to walk over and have, you know, I don't know, ice cream at that kind of booth, because that already wasn't the kind of intangible like feeling that I was creating. Not to say that there's any problem with selling ice cream, but you'd probably use poppier colors. You would use something that implied spontaneity a little bit more than like the natural choices I had made. But you may need to, it might be helpful to do something as simple as we are the, whatever that insight is, best tasting or most natural or the only gluten-free certified, whatever it might be, like try to create a small niche for yourself to say like, we are the this in this particular category, enough to get that 3, 5, 10-second stopping power where someone walks over. I would also say, you seem to be in a category where I would imagine that sampling is fairly inexpensive and a good, a good way to pull people in, right? And it gets people right from, talking again, yesterday we talked a bit about the marketing funnel, right? So at the top of the marketing funnel, people are just becoming aware of what you do at all. Then they're considering and then potentially purchasing. So what I love about sampling is even if they've never heard of you before, you get them through 2 levels of the funnel really quick. Oh my gosh, this is Dan. These bread, there's like 6 to 7 varieties of bread. I can either try 6 to 7, or you might actually choose something different. Maybe you are at the same farmer's market every week, so you only do 1 bread per week because you're really trying to get people to come over every single week and not say, oh, I've already been there. I went there last week. I don't need that, right? They have the pumpernickel this week or whatever it might be. I'm going to walk over. Dan's a really nice guy. Like he has a, whatever silly thing is. There's always a water bowl out and my dog can get a drink of water, whatever the case might be. Then I think when you get them to approach the table, maybe you have some literature about local. And these are all the ways that we are local. That might be, our honey wheat bread has honey from this particular farm. They happen to be across the way, or, oh, they're in Gibsonia. I'm from Gibsonia. Where are they exactly? Right. So there's all these ways that it starts building that, like, whether an individual is like, well, I'm all about community. I'm all about this area. Like you try to just be a lot of different things to a lot of different people and their psychological need states. That's how I would approach it.
All right. Yeah. Sorry, I was just answering a question. Jesse wanted to talk about the funnel. So why don't we go ahead and do that? So Rachel, what steps would you suggest for grains producers to, travel from the top to the middle to the bottom of the funnel for the state of conversion?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it all kinds of begins with the funnel itself doesn't sound like a super sexy thing, in my opinion, at least. And I'm a professional marketer, but the importance of the funnel is to think, like, sometimes it can be tempting to say, for any business at any stage, I don't want to implicate any big companies I've worked at before, but an example just came to mind. Sometimes you say, well, the people that are buying our historical product, that buy it at 20 pounds at a time or whatever it might be, these are the people we need to listen to. And they want something that does 20% more of what, our lead product does right now. So you stay just focused at the customers that are already buying from you, that are at the bottom of the funnel. This can be very tempting. Or you can have businesses at any stage, but probably more often newer businesses that are like, we just need to get the word out. We need to get the word out. We need to get billboards. We need to do an ad. It doesn't matter where we do the ad, anywhere. We just need to get in front of eyes. The marketing funnel sort of makes you take a step back and say, okay, at any particular stage in the business, we really need to be focusing on, are we bringing people into awareness about the company, period? Second, are we creating opportunities for them to learn about the product? Some of those people are going to learn it's not the product for them, right? My product contains gluten. They have a severe gluten allergy. Out of the funnel. My product contains honey and I'm a vegan. I'm not going to, whatever that, and that's fine, right? We want people to get the information they can quickly about our product so we can continue to communicate to other people that are going to go from that consideration stage and say, oh, actually, this is the product for me because I like this. I really want to have local, whatever it might be, and then continue down to purchase. So that would be number one, point I would think about is you want to make sure that you have some marketing tactics that are addressing your target market at each one of these stages. And hopefully you're doing a few different tactics. For grains in particular, the tactics that are going to be most effective for you are going to be different based on the product that you are in. So, I'll tell you one thing that was a big hurdle for me when I was selling granola was that I had a very expensive food cost because I was using nuts that are very expensive, you know, to begin with. So even doing something like a sampling in a grocery store, I'd have to use 3, 4, 5 bags of my own product, even just giving like a very small sample at a time. So this meant that in addition to my time or someone that I paid on an hourly rate to be in that location, to travel there, I also had to use various bags. And inevitably, I would be at the very end of the tasting and I'd only have 2 flavors out of 3 left. And someone would say, oh, can I try that 3rd flavor? And I'd have to open another bag. And you're like, oh, this is like costing me $5 for this person just, you know, to taste something very small. So I would say there are going to be product. I bring up that example to say everyone's got their own unique challenges. And I'd also say that was a product that did not lend, sampling worked, but it also was a very expensive type of brand awareness consideration tactic. But I would say that those of you that are, you know, brewing spirits or things like that, it's probably very different, right? Because there's more cost in bottling and packaging and getting out in the distribution and delivery. So in that case, just participating in events where the brand name can be shown, where you can do a very small sampling, things of that event, as Calla pointed out, right? Some of these things are more relevant at this point in history. Some we're gonna have to wait a little bit to do that sampling. But that's gonna help you get more brand awareness and people down through the funnel. Sampling also can be a little difficult because we know everybody loves free samples, right? Whether you ever plan to buy the product or not. So I would say, you know, consideration is something that increasingly, and I think probably most all of us in the call can relate to this. Even a product that I know I'm going to buy and I'm excited about, let's say it's a planned purchase or some, you know, a green product that somebody told me about. If I'm going to buy it and I'm, you know, waiting outside the doctor's office or I'm on the bus on the way to work or whatever, I tend to get out my phone and look up that company, right? This is why it's so important to have a website, even a very brief, well-designed website, because we know that as consumers, increasingly, we're doing a lot of consideration in a digital environment. We're looking at the Instagram feed, we're going to a website, things of that nature, or we're trying to find a review before we make an expensive purchase. So that's something that I would really think about. Like, it can be as simple as saying, hey, I get the same question a lot about where something is sourced, what, you know, something about my packaging and does it contain or not contain this or that element. I'm going to put that in the frequently asked questions because that's going to do 2 things. It's going to help get over the veto vote of like, oh, I don't want to buy it because of X reason. This person now is able to discover that answer themselves. They're not taking up your time because they're not emailing the info box or they're not saying, forget about it. They can very quickly self-navigate to get the answers that they want. And then of course, at the bottom of the funnel, if you're doing any kind of, well, there's 2 ways. I was going to say, if you're doing any kind of e-commerce online, you know, special deals offers bundles that have a short time limit on them always help to inspire purchase or action, right? Because I was going to try this thing anyhow. I know it's $7.99, but oh, you know, if I buy it by the end of the day, it's going to be $6.99. Or if I buy this, I can also send one to my friend for free, or I can get this deal, or if I buy now, I'm going to get samples of the other products that come along with it. All those things sort of give people that very short-term incentive of like, now is the best time to buy if I haven't reached conversion yet. So I think whatever you might be doing, even if you're doing, but setting e-com aside, even if you're doing B2B sales, you know, selling to another business, wholesale, I think that you can use some of those same tactics. Like, you know, maybe you have someone that, you know, doing free samples inside of like a wholesale purchase can be effective sometimes if it's going directly to a grocery manager or someone that has some purchasing power. On the other hand, you know, sometimes if you just throw a couple of extra things or literature in a box that's going to a storage room, not so effective, right? So it's hard to give a blanket answer, but I would say really learn like the dynamics of the industry that you're in, of the particular customers that you're in. There are going to be some tactics that'll be successful for you.
So I kind of want to go back to talking about that middle of the funnel where you're talking, where you're kind of forming this relationship and having them, the consumer or the business you're partnering with, think about your product and consider it. So when you're talking to different types of customers, because a lot of people who work in regional grains sometimes do have two markets, such as working direct to consumer or B2B. So how do you differentiate that kind of communication?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we're always doing this dance, I think, of balancing I don't know what I want to say, like the short-term, long-term, the business to business, these two channels, as you just mentioned. I think the thing that we want to remember is that consumers are like a person that is the purchasing manager that potentially could buy your product in a wholesale environment. They still most likely have a mobile phone in their pocket, right? They're still buying other goods and services for the rest of their life. So probably if we were to go back 30 years, the way that we would approach business to business marketing and business to consumer marketing would be far more separate than today, right? Because we might have had catalogs, for B2B that were in black and white, lots of serial numbers and things. And that was like a totally different standalone procurement sort of exercise versus what we're doing for consumer. I think that those differences have melted away in many ways. What's probably going to change, and also you could put that in the framework of, okay, here we are, we've established what our brand is, what the essence is, and what the strong reasons to believe are, what that insight is. That message is going to be the same whether you're selling in a wholesale environment or a direct consumer environment, as far as what the brand is. What the selling tools might be that are appropriate in those channels could be different. So as an example, previous to my granola company, I had worked at Heinz for several years. It was really extremely common in a B2B environment that you would have a sell sheet, like a literal 1-page, 8.5 by 11 sell sheet, particularly for groceries and things of that nature. That really was like your brochure, right? But it wasn't a brochure. It was a 1-page, or we'd call them, or a sell sheet. You can go ahead right now or write down on your notes to do after the webinar, Google sell sheet. I recall seeing one probably about a year ago. I can't recall the name, but it was a regional beer company. It was not tremendously large. It could have been a 6-point beer or something like that. But they had like a really great sell sheet that just talked about their beer on the front. Very simple, beautiful graphic of what it looks like. But importantly, when you turn it over, the universal, UPC, universal product codes, the nutritional information, the ingredients, all that relevant information that was really that the buyer might need to know was on the back. So if you think about it again through the marketing funnel, all the glossy consumer message was on the front. Because what would commonly happen to me when I was selling was you walked in, someone tried your product, saw it, didn't even need to try it, just said, okay, I like this. I think this is cool. I need to show my boss. Or they'd say, I love it, but I'm in produce. You need to show the person that handles, food and drinks, packaged food and drinks. I'm going to leave this for them. I'm going to leave this on their desk. You can leave a business card. You can leave your number, but that's not going to be as impactful and be as likely to lead to success as you leave something like a glossy 1-pager. On the front page, you have that beautiful picture, you have the short story. And to put it in another way, you have top of the funnel, right? You've got brand awareness. Oh, this is attractive. I don't know, maybe could we have this? You turn it over and you've got consideration. You've got the UPCs, which is what they need to put it in their retail system. Or that same sell sheet could be going to a restaurant. I don't know, does this fit with what we're doing? There's some tasting notes. I can see the ingredients here. Okay, I'm going to call her back. And now really you're so much closer to conversion then. It's just a really efficient use of your time. It also allows you to say, hey, I'm going to leave you with this sell sheet. Can I have your email? I'm going to follow up and I'm going to send you a digital version as well. You haven't left any pricing information. You just left a really killer 1-page, pretty efficient to get these printed. That's something that really, can help support as well.
And wow, does that sound like a lot?
It's I promise it's not as much work as it sounds like, but it's something that's really efficient. And I'm happy to Google or send you an old sell sheet of mine. If anyone's interested, just send me an email.
Yeah, totally. But to that end, a lot of regional or local grain producers, people who work in grains, they're already wearing a ton of different hats. hats. They're running their business. They might be the ones who are actually, making the bread and selling it and spending all that time. So they have limited time and budget. So with these like sorts of parameters, what would you say are the like best ways to get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of marketing?
Yeah. So I think it depends on, to your point, you could spend 50 hours a week, right, in marketing, or certainly in operations, spending a lot of time already and going out to seek new sales. One thing that I found that really bridges the gap between the marketing and the sales element is that I used a CRM system to really keep track of people that I had met, accounts that were buying from me already. The one I used was called Insightly CRM. I think it's, Insight LY. But there's a lot of these systems now where I found in particular when I was servicing accounts at Whole Foods, I really was doing a lot of B2B marketing. A lot of it was just picking up the phone and talking to particular Whole Foods locations, talking to particular grocery buyers and managers that were within those locations. They had a lot, at this time, 5 years ago, they had a lot of say-so on what was on the shelf or not. So like one of the things that I did, while there's a little upfront work into setting these systems up and a small monthly fee, it costs you so much more to do things twice or to do things inefficiently, right? So I found that these CRM systems were helpful. And the example I'll give you is I had a bagged granola product. I called the 50 Whole Foods locations within my region and was successful in getting a lot of them to carry the granola. At the time, though, that I now introduced a bar, I called many of them back. I called the people that were buying back. But these grocery buyers moved all the time. Sometimes they moved from store to store. So having a selling system like that, I could actually say, well, I spoke with Mahmoud and he moved from Falls Church, Virginia to this other store in Virginia. I already have a relationship with him. And whether me or the other person that was selling with me had spoken to them, I had a log of what we said. Again, this is getting a little more into sales, but I want to use this example because at that point, I brought on 3 bars and I started working with a co-manufacturer to make bars of the granola. And at this point in time, we now had granola and we had bars. We were doing a lot of other expansion work and didn't have time. So what I did was I actually sourced a small box, wrote like a really nice letter, put a sell sheet for these bars into 50 different boxes, and I shipped them to all these grocery buyers that I'd already spoken to. That way, they already knew who I was. I didn't have to make 50 phone calls, which, by the way, I'm sure many of you know, some people get it at 6 a.m. Some people only work Tuesdays. It's really hard to keep up. But when you've already had a relationship with someone, you get what is a trial kit, really. You get it in your product in the hands of these buyers that might even be, half the state away or whatever it might be. They have it. Again, you have the brand awareness. They know about your new product. You've gotten trial taken care of. You're going to follow up with a phone call. That for me was a very effective B2B marketing technique that really, helped us move down the funnel. And again, it's like, I know that there's some setup, and if that's not a tactic that you're using right now, it can sound like a lot, but it's sort of that measure twice, cut once approach, right? Like, do you want to do more work on the back end and do more follow-up, or maybe have less of a hit rate, or take that time and say, okay, how am I going to set up a system that I can quickly communicate to these people when I have new news, or when I just want to check in, hear if their location's undergoing a renovation. Like, how can I not lose my place in the shelf, or also do some things that help work with them, and then maybe there's an opportunity to be featured on an end cap or get more awareness within their store to help move the grains.
Yeah, and also kind of what you were saying earlier about just having a website can be just a very cheap, not very time intensive, especially if you outsource it.
Yes.
Means of kind of connecting with those recurring kind of customers in a way.
Yes. Yeah. And I'd even add, Cal, going back to, it sounds like it can be a lot to set up these different tactics. Let's say you have your grain product. It's something you really believe in. You get you have one photo shoot and you have a photographer you work with, you give them $100 or whatever the case might be, and have them take just a few photos of your product in package, out of package, that sort of thing. That is imagery that you can use and use and use over again. So as an example, let's take the website and let's just say we're going to have a one-page website and you're going to have a sell sheet for those wholesale sales. That one-page website can literally have a paragraph that describes what you are doing that's almost exactly the same as your brand positioning statement. It's just been put into a consumer-friendly way. So it says your brand name at the top, it's got a beautiful picture of what you were selling, and there's a paragraph about what you were doing. That can be it. That is enough to say, we are proud of what we do and we care about what we do. You can take that exact same content, and that's the front side of your sell sheet. So you don't need to be constantly reinventing the wheel. I think you need to be very efficient and choiceful about the approaches that you're taking. That's going to save you a ton of time. And whether that, again, going back to people that are making purchasing decisions on the B2B side, they're consumers too. So they're going to see when they meet you and they see what, perhaps what you're about, you leave a sell sheet, then they go to just check you out online. They're going to see that that story is the same. This builds a ton of trust and says, these people know what they're doing, right? This is someone that we can partner with.
Absolutely. So let's take a break from the technical kind of side of things.
Great.
And talk more high level stuff. So what needs or pain points do you think that regional grain producers fill for consumers that they can market?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say for pain points, we all have a lot of needs, right? That we are competing with all the time, right? We want to have, it's lunchtime. We want to have the most delicious lunch that we could possibly have, right? But many of you, I'm sure, are joining behind desks where you're running your businesses. You might be doing another day job, that sort of thing. So we always have these competing needs of, I'm hungry, but I want to get my work done, but I want to have a gourmet meal, but I have a budget, but I have other constraints, people in the family, things like that, right? So we're always juggling these things. Consumers are the same. They mean very well. And I think they have good intentions, right? 99% of people have good intentions. But they also have these competing needs. They probably, I believe, and I know many of you are very deep in the local, scene and very proud of your products. But I think it's the organic element, all other things equal, people would rather eat organic. But there are often price constraints that prevent people from doing that. Because, using nuts as an example, right? Some organic nuts are as much as 50% or even 90% higher than conventional nuts. So the average consumer might be standing at the shelf and say, I'd rather have this, but, budget wise, I like the almonds taste pretty similar to me. It would be nice to have. So I think that's one thing that we always need to be thinking about is what are the areas where local is a must and what are the areas where it's nice to have? I think for some consumers, it is a must, right? Because of dietary needs, because of their commitment to their community. But I think for the majority, you're going to have that it's a nice to have. So you're going to have to make other connections that beyond just local, really root them in because it's about community. Because it's not just about it's local because that's a little healthier or it's this, it's about it may be a little healthier, it may be a little fresher. It may be just about connecting to your neighbors. And so you want to make sure that all of these messages are really coming through in what you were doing.
That kind of reminds me of a framework we use a lot in food studies. So it's Warren Belasco has this food triangle where each point is a different thing. So it's identity, responsibility, and convenience.
Oh, very good.
And that's the crux of what we make our food decisions on. So I think that maybe part of it could also be identifying where your product fits in that triangle. Identity and responsibility are going to be a lot of those higher minded things. Identity could be oh, I am for lack of a better word, foodie. I hate that word.
Yes.
I'm a foodie. I love local food. I love, that is part of my identity. Or even this producer creates buckwheat, which is something that is important to my cultural heritage, something like that. And then like responsibility is, you know, the local sustainability kind of sides of things. And then the convenience is kind of what you're alluding to with this question of like, is it cost efficient? Is it available? And that sort of thing. So it's just like kind of figuring out where your product kind of fits in with that and how you can maybe communicate those values.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, availability even is a really important note to think about too, right? Because, you know, when back in that world where a lot of people worked in offices and that sort of thing, and you think, well, why do people eat out of vending machines? And why do people, you know, do these things? Why do we drink sugary drinks when we know that we should be having other things? But when things are available, packaged well, good stories are told about them, we're just getting what is available to us then. And sometimes that can be a real challenge, especially for local producers. You know, we are not in as many points of distribution and outlets as we would like to be in. So that becomes a major hurdle, right? So you may also want to be thinking about, am I going after, you know, if I'm living in the, let's say the East End of Pittsburgh, I pass this place all the time, I'm going to go by there, try to start a partnership with them. That could be, you know, fruitful, or it could be like, I'm not really in the South Hills. I'm not really north. I want to get some meaningful places because, you know, I'll repeat it again, but I had brought up yesterday that I had sold the granola and coffee tree roasters, just happened to be introduced to someone, it sort of worked. But now had my brand name in 6 different locations around the Pittsburgh area. That was very tremendously helpful to get the brand awareness out. It also helped me when I went into locations within these satellite communities to already have some awareness to get that sell in. So maybe another thing to consider.
So one thing that we haven't really talked about is taste. You know, a lot of producers are, of course, very proud about their taste, the taste of their product, but how much can you really communicate that, you know, to someone who's trying to make a sale? So when you're marketing, like, how do you communicate about the values of regional grains beyond just the fact that they taste good?
Right. Right. Well, you know, taste in itself is like a very tricky topic because the taste is the most subjective element, right? It's like, it's pretty, it tastes good, it sounds, you know, that music sounds good, whatever the case might be. These are things that may taste good to one person and not taste good to another. Honestly, it's one of the reasons why trial is really important, because particularly, you know, if it's not 99 cents, which most, you know, well-produced products are not, that is a way that you get over that. You know, people are kind of afraid to make that investment in your product and lose their money. That's why it's so important. But, you know, I really, going back to kind of repeat a message again, I think that beyond taste, I think that local and regional is really more of a community message, right? It's about keeping these dollars and jobs within the community. There's a bunch of ways that we might do this. So let's say, I had an example yesterday of like this, you know, Graper Farms buckwheat farm, like what you might be able to do, particularly in a COVID environment where let's say we have a product, it's in a market, and we're not doing as much sampling right now for a number of different reasons. Maybe you have an outdoor day, right? You have a day where you say, hey, it's Meet the Maker Day. I want you to come down. You can come to the Graper family farm. It's one day a year. You know, we have balloons for the kids, whatever. You get to see how we actually harvest and make. And it's something where your consumers can, you know, again, shake hands, or in that 2021 wave to the people that are making these products, and really see like the holistic nature of where the grains are made, milled, harvested, whatever it might be. And then you also have the opportunity to show, if they're finished goods, what they look like, have people sample them. If they are things like, you know, flour and mixes and things that need to be made into something else, you can show all the versatility of the products that you have. You can have recipe cards. You can do a lot of this stuff that creates like a journey of experience. And it also gives you an opportunity, you know, sometimes when you're doing elements like this, the secondary benefit is, if I'm someone that loves this product and I'm already converted, I'm already buying on a regular basis, maybe I live too far, maybe I'm going to be out of town during like a Meet the Maker event like this. Even just the awareness that an event like this is happening increases goodwill and increases my affinity for the brand, right? It makes me think like, I support a company that is doing good things in the community, even if I'm not there to consume that particular event and be part of that particular thing. So it's something that you want to make sure, if you're making this sort of an investment, that on the early end, you are doing social media ahead of time, you're emailing your existing customer list, you're saying, hey, we're going to be doing all these things. You might even have some sort of like, bring a friend ticket offer if you had a small fee to attend. Hopefully you wouldn't need to do that, but you may have some sort of hook. Maybe it's, hey, if you forward this email to a friend and they bring it in and they see there was some kind of referral, they get $5 off anything they buy on site. Something like that, that gives some incentive for your super users to then send that and widen the community, spread the word. And also I'd say on the back end on social media, after the event, you can have pictures. You can say, we're so excited for next year. We're so happy we got to be part of this community. Maybe you invite the local mayor or whatever it might be. You just do these things that kind of resonate, whatever the messages are that you've built the brand upon.
Yeah, totally. So we only have a couple questions left, actually just one, but Jessie would like to know, she wants to know if there is a one-pager about the marketing funnel, all the tactics and examples. If you have anything on hand that might be able to be emailed out to participants.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I have, I'd say two things. I have a slide that I can send that I made that just says a few different tactics at each stage of the funnel. Some of them will be relevant to local brands, some not, right? So you can think about 30-second television commercials, probably not going to be relevant to most brands. But depending on the messaging within that commercial, typically they're going to be at that top of the funnel stage, but some of them will be middle funnel. Or let's think of a car commercial and there's that incentive, you got to come in here and buy, by the end of Memorial Day weekend, that's going to be more conversion. So you may see things like that in that slide. I just want to point that out. That doesn't mean they're going to be relevant for you. But I would also say really one of the richest resources is to set aside, carve out 15 minutes and go online and look at what other people are doing online, particularly for businesses that are similar in structure to yours. You can say, hey, I'm really trying to get new customers. Like, and you can use the words top of the funnel or not top of the funnel in your search, but you're going to get a lot of contemporary examples, and new ideas from other businesses. There's a lot of people doing this kind of business development work and marketing online right now. And so there's a lot of great shared assets out there.
Absolutely. So I have kind of a two-sided question. So what problems have you run into with communicating local grains to consumers?
Sure.
First side, and then the other side of the question is, what opportunities do you see in communicating regional grains?
Yeah, sure. So, I'll touch upon an example that came up in the branding session as well, which is, one thing I experienced was having, when I was making granola, someone saying, do you source, it was organic honey that was used. Is that local? And organic honey, for reasons of how honeybees travel, really isn't available in the United States. So what I would say was it was sourced from a honey producer in Lancaster. This was true. I also wanted to touch on that just for a brief second, because there was a question that came in after this session. And there was sort of, it's going to kind of hit the point that I'm going to make. So, what is local? In order for something to be local, does every single step, does 99 of 100 steps along the value chain have to happen locally? That's sort of all in the eye of the beholder, I guess. Or is it that one step of those 100 happens locally and it can be local? Probably neither state is true or necessary. I think you want to make substantial value and meaningful contribution local, and you really want to get behind only communicating these things as local that truly are local, where a lot of value is being added. So as an example, it was not a tenet of my brand to say in that particular example that we used local honey, right? Because it was a little bit of a gray area. It was like, well, someone processed it within Pennsylvania and that, blah, blah, blah. So that wasn't something. But if someone asked questions, we would answer all their questions, truly and honestly about all the sourcing. But that wasn't where we went. That said, the majority of the value chain of making that granola happened locally, happened So I use that example because it's a little bit messy, because the reality is no matter how many steps we try to make local, we're probably using machinery that's not local. We are using, whether you're using a glass jar or a paper package, bottle, that sort of thing. Those bottles and papers and inks that are printed are probably not local, right? Does that mean the whole thing's not local? Not in my opinion, right? I think you got meaningful value, it's local. But however, I will then move that to say, that is one of the holdups, one of the challenges of being a local producer. Sometimes you have consumers that are challenging you because I actually have had the experience a few times of sampling or being in front of a customer at a farmer's market, selling my product, and they were sort of like grilling me to find something that was not local about the product. Will you do this? And where do you get your business cards printed? I live in Lawrenceville. There's places you don't get them printed there. In this case, silly example, I have a printer friend that was here in New York City that had worked at several companies who always gave me a great deal. I, with a clear conscience, had him print my business cards at a discount, right? But sometimes I think the challenge is, to put it more succinctly, as local producers, we are held to a higher standard than any other product that the consumers buy sometimes. And I'm not a fan of that. I think local is a great thing. I think you are adding to the community. I think you are creating jobs. So sometimes that can be tricky to be held to that higher standard, knowing that our costs typically are higher, right? We're not getting those economies of scale that national companies are getting. So that is the challenge. I would say, on the other hand, though, the opportunity is that you get this real intimacy to stand in front of the customer, to have them try something. And even if they try a variety of your grains or product that they don't like, you say, oh, tell me what you do like. You know what? You get this immediate feedback loop to say, I have another thing I want you to try. Hold on right here. Let me go get some for you, right? And you sort of are creating this relationship with them. You also have the opportunity to hear various themes over and over again, whether it's you or other people that you're working with on your team. In particular, one real insight that I had is when the granola was originally developed, I had processed it in a facility that was, there are no ingredients that were gluten-free at all, but the facility itself was not certified gluten-free. So I didn't put gluten-free in the marketing. However, that was a question I got over and over and over again, to the point that it was worthwhile to invest in processes that made the processing facility as gluten-free as possible. I then invested in testing each and every batch to make sure it was gluten-free. So I could confidently say, we are a gluten-free product, and here's all the reasons you can believe that we're gluten-free. So that's a big advantage that other people don't get, that I should say larger companies do not get. That's going to help you make your products better, more insightful, able to meet the needs of your customers.
And that was my last question.
Great.
So unless anybody comes up with something super quickly, I guess we can just wrap it up. Cassandra, are you there?
I'm here. That sounds great. This is such an insightful conversation. Thank you both so much. I'm really just excited to keep sharing this conversation when we put the recording out there. And please, I urge any attendees to continue to reach out to us with questions. And if you fill out the survey that I just dropped in the chat, you can help us continue to grow and improve these types of educational offerings. But this was a great conversation, and thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye now.
Take care.